Welcome back to our course. Today we're going to be talking about Emergent Strategy by Adrienne Marie Brown. I'm going to just share some of the most moving parts of this chapter to me, and I encourage you to give this chapter a very careful read. There's a lot in it, and it's very different from a lot of the other stuff that we're going to be reading. Emergent Strategy gives us a way of thinking about change and broader social change that draws on the natural world for inspiration and looks to the way that natural systems and natural species operate, and uses inspiration from there to try to solve some of our most pressing challenges. So I want to try to explain some more of Brown's approach, and I think that you'll really enjoy it. So she starts out with this list in the first couple pages. She said, small is good, small is all. So she's talking really about focusing on what's here and now, our intimate relationships. Emergent strategy is the idea that we can build on the here and now, what's right in front of our faces, and the kind of changes we want to create in our communities and our families, in our roommate suites, and how that's all going is going to be reflected at a larger scale, and change is going to emerge from those smaller scale adjustments that we make in our daily lives. Change is constant, so it's all about accepting change, and we're going to look at the chapter on intentional adaptation. So this idea that we accept the changes, but we aren't just passive in the face of change. We're strategizing and moving through those changes with intention and seeing opportunities for human agency within the changes that are inevitable, where there's no opportunity for human agency. There's always enough time for the right work. Never a failure, always a lesson. Ways to use the problems we encounter and the mistakes that we make as opportunities to improve on our strategizing and to improve on the changes that we're making. Trust the people, move at the speed of trust. She says, focus on critical connections more than critical mass. Build the resilience by building relationships. So again, it's focused on smaller scale changes in our intimate relationships, who we're connected to and how we relate to them, and what kind of relationships we are in with what's right around us that's going to lead to the larger changes that we need. Less prep, more presence, so staying attuned to what's happening in the moment. What you pay attention to grows. And a lot of environmental ethics is focused on crisis. We're in a crisis, and there's a lot of focus on what's bad and what bad is to come, and what we pay attention to grows. So she says later in the book, she says, I'd rather stop growing the crisis and stop growing the negative, the fear and the panic about what we're encountering, and instead pay attention to where there are opportunities for me to insert my agency, what I can change, and how to still embrace our agency, and to decide what we're going to focus on and what we want to grow. So then she goes through this list of things in nature, objects in nature, or, well, Kimmerer would say more than human persons in nature, systems and organisms that exemplify some of the values that she's advocating in the book. So mycelium is the part of the fungus that grows underground in thread-like formations. It connects roots to one another and breaks down plant material to create healthier ecosystems. Mycelium is the largest organism on Earth. It can teach us interconnectedness, remediation, and detoxification. So one thing that we'll learn from Kimmerer is that once you stop poisoning the system automatically heals itself. So we really have nature working in our favor to survive and to heal, and we can use that tendency to direct our efforts. And so also looking at how we're all interconnected, and how important it is to think about toxins, both at the larger societal level, but also in our own bodies. Ant societies function through individual ants acting collectively in accord with simple local information to carry on all of their survival activities. Every ant relies on the work of others in producing their own work. Cooperative work, collective sustainability. So we're all in this together. We have to think about the role that we play in a larger context of what everyone else is doing. Ferns are a form of fractal. A fractal is an object or quantity that displays self-similarity, which means it looks roughly the same at any scale. Small-scale solutions impact the whole system. Use similar principles to build at all scales. So the smallest part of a fern looks the same as the pattern, the shape of the leaves overall, the shape within each leaf, and she uses this idea a lot. So you can see, she says, back to your own roommate suite, if democracy is not working in your household, then how can you expect it to work at a larger societal scale? So using those sort of smaller scale day-to-day interactions to create change at the larger level, because whatever comes out of our society at the larger scale, when we think of the big picture view, is going to mirror what's happening at the smaller scale, how our relationships are with one another. The wavicle or wave-particle duality suggests that all objects exhibit both wave and particle properties. Between observations as it evolves on its own, it behaves like a wave distributed across space, exploring different intermixing paths to all possible destinations. However, when its location or speed is measured, it appears definite and concrete like a particle. Its wave nature gives this measurement a curious property. The more certain we are about speed or position, the more uncertain we become about the other. Uncertainty, doubt, valuing both process and outcome. So not feeling like we're grasping some solid thing that we're trying to create, but being open to change, because change is constant, and also to how that process is developing. I hope the horn honking in the distance. I'm like in the middle of Durham right now. This is actually my backyard, and there's a U-Haul station, like a U-Haul company just beyond that tree line, and a gas station, Guest Road. It's all parts of the world kind of mixed together. The natural part here, you can see, just looks like an endless forest of green. I love it back here, but I'm actually very close to civilization and a 4-lane road that's really noisy. All right, starlings. The synchronized movement patterns of the starling flock is also known as a murmuration. Guided by simple rules, starling murmurations can react to their environment as a group without a central leader orchestrating their choices. In any instant, any part of the flock can transform the movement of the whole flock. Collective leadership, partnership, adaptability. And we're going to look at starlings in a moment. All right, dandelions. A dandelion flower head can change into a white globular seed head overnight. Each seed has a tiny parachute that allows it to spread far and wide in the wind. The entire plant has medicinal properties. Dandelions are often mistakenly identified as weeds, aggressively removed, but are hard to uproot. The top is pulled, but the long taproot remains. It can teach us resilience, resistance, regeneration, and decentralization. So decentralization means there's not one central authority sort of commanding or creating the change or trying to enact their vision and bring everyone on board with them. But it's decentralized, so the power is really with everyone, spread out all around. She's going to say more about that. Okay, so these are the elements of emergent strategy. She's talking about fractals again, the relationship between large and small, and the idea that something at a large scale mirrors it at every level. So even at the smallest scale, she talks about patterns in spatial configurations when we look to space and how they resemble even vegetables that we have here. There was another example I've forgotten. Adaptative, how we change. So using the idea that change is constant and that we can affect how those changes unfold, even though the changes are coming whether we like them or not. We can look for opportunities in those changes to direct the change towards the kind of world that we want to create. Interdependence and decentralization, who we are and how we share. So thinking about how we're all connected to one another, and she's working with a model of change that really sees the power coming from the people dispersed from all different kinds of people, all enacting their own vision together instead of one central authority figure trying to get everyone on board with them. Non-linear and iterative. So the pace and pathways of change, thinking not that we're on a direct route to making the world the way it needs to be, but that there's lots of different routes to get there, and we'll take lots of different routes on the way. Resilience and transformative justice, how we recover and transform. So thinking again about Kimmer's example of the soil, which was really heavily polluted. There was nothing living in it, and it looked gray, like really light gray when she discovered it. And then as soon as they stopped putting in those toxins, the soil healed itself in a sense. Ants returned first and started to turn the soil, and then more plant life was able to grow because of that, which nourished the ant populations, and then it just went from there, creating more and more life and restoring its natural state. And creating possibilities. So thinking of what's possible for us, not being convinced that there's only one route that we're doomed, but thinking about what other worlds we can create, because the world's going to look different in a few decades, whether we like it or not. And I mean radically different. It already does when you think of what it used to be when you were in middle school or something. So these changes are constant and unfolding and radically transforming how we relate to each other, how we organize ourselves as a society, and seeing those changes as opportunities for really directing things the way that we as a collective want and need them to progress. Okay, so take a look at this list on page 48 and 49. She's talking about sort of how we're taught in our society to acquiesce, to be sort of conforming, to stop thinking of what's possible. I mean, I know an author who wrote about how he presented to kindergartners, and they were full of questions and ideas, and there were tons of hands going up every time there was an opportunity. And then he would teach the same material to high school students, and there was just none of that sort of eagerness or curiosity or willingness to be creative or to think of alternative to have alternative ways of thinking of things. So how do we learn that, and what is it that we learn? I'll leave this list for you to look through, but I want to ask you what else you think goes on this list. And do you think she's right that we're taught these things, like taught that tests and deadlines are the reason to take action, or taught facts totally out of context, or taught to be quiet, polite, indirect, and submissive, to manipulate each other, deny our longings? Are these accurate, do you think? And if so, what's missing? Or if not, what's missing? What is what are the ways we're taught, and how is what we're taught in our culture and the values that it instills in us conducive or not conducive to solving the climate crisis, solving the environmental challenges that we're facing? Okay, so now we get to look at starling murmurations, which are pretty amazing. So I don't know if any of you have ever seen this in real life, but I haven't. But it's extraordinary. These are birds. There can be millions of birds creating these patterns. And she points out it's not like there's one bird saying, okay, come on, everybody, now we're going to go this way, or now we're going to go that way. It's about every bird connecting with each of the 5 or 6 birds immediately around it in the right way, reading its body cues. That's how these patterns are created. And so, again, she's using examples from nature to think about how we can create change, how we can move the world in a better direction. Okay, so intentional adaptation. So she's talking about the elements of emergent strategy again, and one of them is intentional adaptation. So what is intentional adaptation? Well, it's a combination of two concepts. The first one is adaptation, a change in a plant or animal that makes it better able to live in a particular place or situation. The process of changing to fit some purpose or some situation. Process of adapting. I like that. Adapt changes. That's an interesting, what are those called? Forget the word. All right, so intention is the other part of intentional adaptation. The thing that you plan to do or achieve, an aim or purpose. So intentional adaptation is combining these two ideas. Intentionality, that is doing things on purpose, doing what you mean to do, doing what you intend to do, with adaptation, how we change to fit the circumstance. Okay, so it's really a way of thinking about change that accepts that changes are coming whether we like them or not, and that we have control within that reality to adapt, and to adapt in ways that we decide, that we envision for ourselves and what we want. Instead of moving towards anything in particular, we are in nonstop reaction. So right now, our response to the climate crisis is just that, to all the environmental catastrophe that we've witnessed. I mean, think about Ishmael. Where are we on this path to self-destruction? We're reacting. We're cleaning up after floods, rebuilding in areas that are flood-prone. Instead of deciding what kind of world we want given the changes that are coming and what kind of world is actually sustainable. So we're just responding to crisis after crisis after crisis. How do we practice increasing our ease with what is? Change happens. So again, accepting that the changes are coming, whether we like them or not, but we still have room for agency within that. And how do we be comfortable with those changes when they're disastrous for so many of us? Changing while staying in touch with our deeper purpose and longing. So again, intentional adaptation, that's what it's about. It's about really recognizing what we want and where we want to be headed, and then using our awareness of that to direct the changes that are coming, whether we like them or not. The energy it takes to bemoan the change can instead fuel positive movement forward. So instead of using all our energy to react and to resist the change that's coming, we can use that energy towards moving in a positive direction. What is easy is sustainable. Birds coast when they can. So she's really thinking about using getting the most impact for our effort. So somebody explained it to me once, like, think of a swing when you're pushing somebody on a swing, or sometimes this happens in baseball or softball, where most of the pushes or most of your hits are going to be just off so that you're not getting the maximum power of the ball or the swing. But when you get it just right in that perfect spot with a baseball or a swing, when you're pushing a swing, you get it just right, it just takes off. And so that's what this point is about, I think, is that really using our energy in the most efficient way so that we get that big impact for the smallest effort, so that we can maximize our impact with the effort that we're going to take. It's not about reducing our effort, it's about increasing our impact. Nature's taught me that if humans don't figure out what revolution really means, nature will make the revolution despite us. So again, the change is coming. The world is going to look different. We can't sustain this lifestyle. And so what that's going to look like is up to us. And if we don't create those changes that we want, if we don't utilize our power to affect the way things are unfolding, then they're going to look different in ways that we may not want. And so one way or another, things are going to look radically different. And this is all the miracle. So she tells a story about being late to a workshop and how she was just so flustered, and she could have let that sort of overcome her whole mentality and had a terrible time at the meeting, but instead she realizes These 30 minutes of being late to the meeting in Boston traffic are being lived by my miraculous, irreplaceable body in a dynamic and outstanding system of life moving toward life. I don't want to waste any of this time. So really appreciating the miracle of life, the fact that we're here alive, that the world in many ways is better than it's ever been throughout history, and utilizing that role and that miraculousness to really affect our own attitude towards change and our own capacity for staying in this game and this keeping our efforts going. Okay, and then she's got this longer quote, which I'll leave you with. This is page 77 and 78. I'm just going to read this aloud. Instability has become a defining feature of our times. In many ways, this instability is the new landscape of social struggle. It's useful to classify the economic and ecological disruptions that make up this new normal of instability into two groups: shocks and slides. So shocks present themselves as acute moments of disruption. These are, for example, market crashes, huge disasters, and uprising. You can think about the lockdown when COVID happened. Slides, on the other hand, are incremental by nature. They can be catastrophic, but they are not experienced as acute. So now we can think of COVID currently. I mean, there's still, the virus is still evolving. It still has a risk of long COVID, which the New York Times just reported 400 million people worldwide have long COVID, but we're not concerned about it anymore because it's happening gradually, and the impact that has had on us is easy to ignore. On us as a country and as a society more broadly. They can be catastrophic, but they're not experienced as acute. Sea level rise is a slide. Rising employment is a slide. The rising cost of food and energy are a slide. While they share a set of root causes, the scale, pace, and implications of shocks and slides differ and therefore require different responses. One of our key roles must be to harness the shocks and direct the slides. All towards achieving systemic, cultural, and psychic shifts, we need to navigate the changes with the greatest equity, resilience, and ecological restoration possible. We define a shift as a social, political, economic, and/or cultural transformation. From our perspective, we want shifts in the direction of ecological resilience and social equity as an imperative. We believe that shifts can emerge from collective aha moments, when social movements awaken the popular imagination to new possibilities and spark social action. And we're arguing that the coming shocks and slides, if we anticipate and prepare for them properly, can be key opportunities to spark these aha moments. Shifts also result from well-organized communities creating new institutions that meet people's needs as responses to the shocks and slides better than the dominant systems can, such as food sovereignty projects, collectivized housing systems, cooperative economics, etc., etc. So think about shocks and slides with what we've already read and also with what we're about to read, because it's related to everything, including the book that you just read, Ishmael. So think about all that stuff and how it connects, and you'll have a chance to write about it soon. Okay, you should read this last quote too, but I will let you do that. Okay, so again, please spend some time with this chapter. I hope you enjoy Adrienne Maree Brown. She lives in the area. She's very active on social media, and she's out there giving talks and stuff if you want to check her out. I will see you next time.